Welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how to make a simple shirt for this puppet using secondhand clothes. I like using secondhand clothes because good apparel fabric is hard to find. Places like Joann's and other local fabric stores usually don't have very good apparel fabric. Joann's mostly has like quilting and costuming fabric, not ideal for making clothes. By getting secondhand clothes, you can get really good fabric at a really cheap price. So one thing a lot of people do when making clothes for a puppet is a lot of times they'll get like old kids' clothes and try to fit that on. Kids' clothes are not proportioned to most puppets. What I like to do is buy like double or triple XL size shirts and use them as fabric to make the clothes. Sometimes if you're lucky, you can use pieces still. Sometimes I like to use part of the collars and where the buttons and buttonholes are. Let's get started. So let me start off just by putting this on my character here. Now looking at it, these collars are way too large. So what I'm gonna do is cut them down to about, I'm gonna cut about 1.5 inches off the width. So now I have this collar off. Now let's kind of fit this to about the size. So I'm deciding I want to reuse these buttons and buttonholes. Have the buttons centered, find the ends of the shoulders. You want to put the shoulder lines where they should be, which in this case I can feel it right about there. I'll put a pin there. I want to find about how wide to make it. I'll mark it there with a pin in the front and in the back. Now a lot of these measurements I'm going to actually transfer to the other side. So if it's not perfect, that's okay. Okay, so here's our shirt. I buttoned it back up so we can make sure it's symmetrical. Now it looks like on this puppet, from the center of the shirt, which is the center of the buttons, it's about 5.5 inches from the side. So I'm actually gonna just go for it, and I'm gonna use a Sharpie. I would normally use pencil, but I'm gonna use a Sharpie so that you guys can see it a little better, hopefully in the camera. So, and since I'm using the marker, I'm also gonna compensate for seam allowance a little bit and go to the outside. So I'm gonna draw a line down about here. And then that's my shoulder seam. So I'm gonna have it come down like this, down like that. So let me cut that out. Just like that. So now that that is all cut out, I have to mirror that on the other side. So I'm just gonna trace it, fold it over and trace it. So let's see here, make sure I fold it right on the center there. Oh, this has a shirt pocket on it. For right now I'm gonna ignore it, but I'm gonna carefully take those seams out a little later. So there we have that. So next I want to do this part of the sleeves. So I'm actually going to draft that. So his arm is 7 inches long. I'm going to add 2 inches to that. 1 inch is to allow for a 1/2 inch seam allowance on each side. The other inch is just so it's not too snug. Clothes are a little bit more loose rather than being completely form-fitting, like making a fleece covering. So I'm going to make it 9 inches long. And for that I'm going to use some of this scrap from the rest of the shirt. I'm going to quickly draw out a pattern for the sleeve. The pattern has to be about the width of the shirt. So the shape of a sleeve is kind of like this. That looks like that'll fit. So then I think this will be my pattern. Like that. Let's see how that fits. That looks good there. Might be a little bit too long. Let me cut off about 1.5 inches. Here we have it. So I doubled up this fabric here. I'm going to trace out my sleeve pattern. So now what I have to do is stitch this sleeve along this edge from there to there. All right, there it is. I just stitched those parts of the sleeve on. What I'm gonna do next is the part that would cover up the hands, the cuffs, and the rest of the arm. Yeah, unfortunately these cuffs are too small for my actual hands. so we're gonna have to make our own. Real cuffs are actually a little bit more complicated to make than you would think because of the way that this vent is there. Now for a puppet, we don't really have to make it that same way. We're gonna simplify it. So let's actually cut the sleeve off right under where the vent is. And let's see if that gives us, oh yeah, that's definitely big enough for the hand to go through. Is it long enough to cover up this whole thing? Yes, it is. Now let me just cut this evenly across, about right there. So these are gonna be our sleeves, but now let's make the cuffs. So this was the lower back of the shirt. I just used interfacing and ironed it onto it to make it a little stiffer, give it a little bit more body. That's an important step for making the cuffs. Okay, so this is our sleeve. So each cuff needs to be about, well, it has to be 13 inches long. So I'm getting short on my fabric, so I'm gonna do mine about 12 inches long. So I stitch up these edges, but I'm gonna give it a curve toward the top. So I just stitch those up, and I'll be trimming from the stitch line. So it's got a slight curve at the top, if you can see that. Let me turn them and steam them, and there they are. So here are our sleeves that are going to be connected to the cuffs right there. Now what I'm going to do is just put a little 1/2 inch notch in each corner. That will leave me room for the seam allowance and let me know where to stop when stitching on the cuffs, just like that. So now from notch to notch, I'm going to stitch on those cuffs. Alright, so I just stitched that on and I did all the top stitching around it, which really makes it look like a cuff. So, and I left out this 1/2 inch of seam allowance so I can stitch that up too. Now again, that's not how actual cuffs are made on a shirt, but it will look pretty much the same and it'll be perfect for a puppet. So now what I'm going to do is stitch up this section here and then up the cuffs. So now the cuff sleeves are all finished. Now next thing we have to do is match up the armholes. We'll do the armholes right under the cuffs. So just cut that hole in, and now I'm going to cut a strip going right up the center of that hole. This will make it much easier for me to stitch on the sleeve. Now there are other ways to do this. This is just the way that I'm used to it, and I think it's the easiest and fastest way to stitch it on. So I just stitched up this whole side. This whole side is completely done. This side just needs one seam. That's why I cut that extra line from the hole where we attach the arms, because now it just takes one long seam going all the way, let me show you on this side, going all the way around this inside edge to complete this shirt. So I'm gonna do this side, and then we'll do the collar, and then we'll be done. Let me turn it inside out, and then this side is done. There he is. It's really starting to look like a shirt now. Last thing is the collar. So first thing I have to do is use a seam ripper and take out the remains of the collar that's left, and then we'll just set in the new one, and then we'll be done. Now let's get this collar in. I'll pin it in. All right, just stitched it up and it's done. So let's just, let me wrestle this onto this guy. The hardest part is getting all this bulk through the short, or rather the forearm, because it's so narrow. But that's the design of the puppet, so that's what we're doing. It's not that bad though. And there it is. Fits like a glove. This might be a difficult tutorial for some of you to follow. The reason for that is that there's no really way around it. Making clothes for puppets is a lot like making clothes for people. There's a lot of advanced sewing techniques used, and just to be clear, this is not a tutorial on how to use a sewing machine, so I cut most of those parts out. This is really a video about how to get the fit onto a puppet, since their body types are different than human, and how to alter existing clothes to fit your puppet. And this is officially the final video for the series of this live hand puppet. I want to do another whole series on puppet building for a monster character. Hopefully that'll come out next summer. But don't worry, there's gonna be a whole bunch of videos between now and then. I have a lot of exciting stuff coming up. So stay tuned. Until then, see you next time.
There's way too much toothpaste on my brush, but still I won't fret. My milk is past due, that much I can boast. I stomach this curdled dairy strawberry sludge and I pushed down some toast. Beep, 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 beep. Oh no, fire, help! I frantically snuff out all these flames, yet I proudly yell. The best